I mean, the fundamental problem, as you said, is incentives, right? So it's just too cheap to buy a new tent. But thankfully, like I think the trends around what consumers are looking for and making more sustainable
Mm.
choices, the consumer demand is pulling companies towards circular, and then also regulation, right? So especially at the EU level, we have a lot of regulation coming in that's hopefully going to push that trend and accelerate it.
Got my coffee and today's guest here with me, so we're ready to roll. Welcome to the Circular Coffee Break podcast, where we'll be talking about everything circular and beyond. Now, my guest today is Henry Beniard, COO at Twice Commerce, and I'm really looking forward to talking with him about circular economy and sustainability in e-commerce. It's a crucial topic in our modern world, where actually the rapid growth of online shopping is posing new challenges and opportunities for environmental sustainability. So really looking forward to hear his perspective on that. Welcome to the show, Henry.
Hi, Michael. Thanks so much for having me.
Great to have you. And as said, I mean, you are at Twice Commerce now. To get us started, can you maybe share a little bit about yourself, your journey, and what led you to Twice Commerce?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So maybe like to give you the, the slightly long version. So maybe by way of background, I studied actually something somewhat technical. So I studied econometrics at university, which is basically economics and math and statistics. And then people always ask, well, okay, so how does one go from that to then the business world, consulting, startups, and then more circular things? Uh, I think, well, it's not directly applicable, the learnings I have from there, but what I got out of there was sort of a frame of mind. So I tend to think about things in terms of models and how do you model out phenomena, be it business phenomena or any other phenomena,
Hmm.
and also thinking about things in terms of supply and demand. So where's the supply and where's the demand, and how do we match the two, which is really sort of fundamentals of commerce, right? So well, once I graduated, I then landed into strategy consulting, where I spent actually almost a decade. So I worked a lot with multinationals, especially in the consumer goods industry. So I have a strong background in
Hmm.
consumer. Worked a lot on various topics, really anything from supply chain to manufacturing to strategy, international expansion, growth, marketing. So it was a very good learning ground to get sort of a 360 A to Z on all things business. Uh, and then after that, I sort of landed into a company which was growing rather rapidly called Wolt at the time. So it's one of the leading food delivery companies in Europe. Uh, I was there as employee 500 and something. And
Hmm.
that was sort of my experience in hypergrowth. So we went from 500 to 5,000 people in 2 years.
Hmm.
I was in charge of merchant operations there. So basically, all the stores and the restaurant side of that business. Uh, and that was sort of a very interesting experience in how do you keep things on track and how do you grow something that quickly uh, and at that scale. Mm, and then after that, eventually that company got sold off to DoorDash to the US, and I was looking
Hmm.
for something to sink my teeth into and really going smaller scale. So having been with a 5,000 or at that time even 6,000 person company, uh, looking for something that I could build from the ground up, and then really sort of also from a personal perspective, hoping to do something maybe net positive. So I was really thinking about, okay, what could I do with my skill set? I really like tech, I really like startups, but could I find something where uh, I would agree with the values and with the mission of that startup?
Hmm.
Or if not, then could I found one company myself? And then that's when I came across Twice Commerce, and I joined that company as then Chief Operating Officer in 2022. And I guess we'll talk more about that in a moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Great to hear, and really interesting path. And I think in circularity, sustainability, there's currently a lot of great ideas, but very often the scaling is difficult. Because scaling in itself is difficult, but I think in this space it seems to be specifically difficult for companies to move to the scaling phase.
For sure. And I think there's a lot to that. I mean, I guess in general, when you talk about circularity, there's so much of the world that's sort of, or there's so much in circularity. Like there's recycling, there's manufacturing, there's different types of parts of it. Mm-hmm. Our company and me personally, we're more focused on like the business models part of circularity. So how do you make businesses use more circular business models? So be that rentals or subscriptions or resale capabilities.
Interesting. And you mentioned Twice. So Twice is a platform for the circular economy and with basically two components, as I understand. Twice Market, which is more for individuals, and then Twice Commerce, which is more for companies. Now, how is the setup? How is Twice designed, put together in order to support the circular economy? What are some of the key specifics that the platform provides, both for individuals as well as businesses?
For sure, yeah. And maybe it will be helpful for your audience as well if I sort of take a step back and say how I look at sort of circular commerce, as we call it. So, like I think. There's a lot of talk about supply chain innovation and recycling and all of that, but there's actually, I find, not that much talk about, okay, me as a business, I'm a retailer, I'm a brand. How do I launch a circular business model? Okay, I can listen to a lot of excellent podcasts on how to do design, on how to do the supply chain, but actually, when we talk to CEOs of big multinationals, it's really like, okay, I need to run a completely new business model. How do I do that, right? So that's one. But then if you look at, okay, what are the business models that are available for any brand? Let's say Adidas, let's say Nike. Ideally, you would probably do rentals. So no one would own sneakers. You would only rent them out and then return them and get new ones in an ideal sort of circular world. But the reality is there's no demand for that. Talking again about supply and demand and how I think about stuff, like there's probably a handful of people in the world who would like to rent all of their sneakers, but most people prefer to have them still in their wardrobe today. That's the reality of the world we live in, right? Same for subscriptions and same for any kind of models. But what does exist, what is an existing business model is sort of resales and secondhand sales. So there we have demand. Like there's, I would say, a mass market of used high quality sneakers. But then if you zoom into that resales market, the second question is like, okay, so where is the supply for the secondhand sneakers? And it's not with the brand, it's not with Nike, it's not with Adidas. So you have all these large multinationals that are hoping to start like a circular business model, and for them, the initial first step is usually, okay, re-commerce, so resale. So how do we sell secondhand? And the problem they face is then supply. Like, how do I source supply? If I want to sell 1 million sneakers, I can call the factory and I can have 1 million virgin material sneakers, or maybe recycled if they've done a lot of work on that. But then how do I get 1 million used sneakers? Well, you really can't. So everything secondhand that you have, you're for sure you'll sell, but sourcing that supply is immensely difficult. And so that's a key problem to solve, basically. Where is the supply? The supply is with consumers, right? So like if you look at the US alone, people, and I talk about the US because our main market is the US, but people own like $600 billion worth of stuff that they don't use. And there's a massive market for storage spaces in the US, and a lot of it is because of that. And there's a lot of reality television also about these storage spaces. But basically, there's a surplus of stuff in the world. And also, if you look at how much consumer goods people are purchasing, I think it's something like a household buys 110 items, but only sells and disposes of 50 a year or something on average. So that means you're accumulating more and more stuff every year. So the stuff is there, but then how do you get that stuff sort of back into circulation to get that second circle? And that's why we're called Twice as a company, is because we believe every item should be sold at least twice. So that's the problem we set out to solve, basically, that supply-demand imbalance. And for that, like you very well said, we have a product called Twice Market. Twice Market is basically a hyper-local marketplace powered by AI. So what that means in practice is, as a seller, you can take a photo of any item you have, and it automatically creates a listing and shares it on Twice Market. So imagine you have a yard sale, you want to declutter, you just take 100 photos and boom, your catalog is there and it's live and it's hyper-local. And anyone in the town, in the city, in the community can go about acquiring it. But then also we build a bridge from consumer back to business. So if you're Adidas, if you're Nike, you can just run a search. You can say, okay, I want to buy Stan Smith's sneakers from 2022 model. You can find all of the listings for Stan Smith's available in the US, and you can sort of bulk buy that back into your inventory if you want to. So supply demand, the key problem is that what we're solving with Twice Market on the consumer side. Then we also have sort of a business product. And as let's say you want to become like a power seller, you want to sell more. There's a progression for you to go to sort of Twice Commerce, and there you need more sort of typical e-commerce tools and e-commerce stack. So you're going to need inventory management, you're going to need order management, payments, etc. So we facilitate that as well with Twice Commerce. But here, the biggest issue, or one of the big issues that you have as a company that wants to do a circular business model, is actually in inventory. So let's stay with the example of sneakers. And let's say I want to resell sneakers, or even better, I want to rent out sneakers, as opposed to linear commerce, where I just have a balance of, okay, I have 100 sneakers of this model on my balance sheet or on my inventory. Now I have 100 unique sneakers, each with their own unique wear and tear, and I need to track the life cycle of each sneaker individually, not just purely from a sustainability perspective, although it is important to understand sort of the CO2 of the life cycle, but also from a profitability perspective, because that's how you optimize for profitability, is by having the ability to track that individual pair of sneakers. So that's something we do particularly well, the unique level inventory tracking. So when product goes out to the customer and comes back, you're still able to track it and manage that. And it's like a couple of orders of magnitude more difficult than traditional inventory management. So those are the two things we work on.
Yeah. Interesting, and I think you're addressing some of the key challenges that companies today have in switching to these new circular models. Exactly as you said. I mean, it's easy to write into your strategy that we are a circular company now. It's much more difficult to incorporate that into your business models, into your operations, be it logistics, be it reverse logistics, be it inventory management. All of these different elements have a complexity in the circular economy that goes beyond the already very large complexity that you have today in companies. So it's very important to address those. Now, you outlined it a little bit, but how do you actually help companies then to basically make this transition from the traditional linear model to a circular one? And do you have maybe an example that you could exemplify that on where a company has successfully transitioned towards this circular model using Twice Commerce and the functionality you just outlined?
Yeah. So to be perfectly honest with you, no one has fully transitioned, right? No one is 100% circular. I think that's just the reality of where we are. But we do have companies that are in the high single digits, maybe low double digit percentages of their businesses being circular now. And if you look at the industries where we serve, especially like on the European market, I feel like big companies in the European market are maybe slightly more advanced and slightly more thinking about actually implementing circular business models. We have a lot of companies in sort of the outdoor retail space and DIY. If you think about why, I think it's sort of quite logical. Everything where the usage from the consumer perspective is occasional, it makes sense that you'd want to maybe rent that instead of buying a completely new model. Let's say you want to go out camping once a year, you maybe don't need to actually own that tent, right? Or let's say you're doing renovations once a year, maybe you don't need to own the sandblaster and the power drill and all of that. So that's sort of the early adopting segments, let's say. And in terms of brands that we have, Decathlon, which is a big French multinational, use us in some of their markets, basically to run their rental operation. So if you want to rent out, outdoor gear, stuff like that, you can use Decathlon. You can use, rentals powered by Twice. And then there's, for example, a European DIY store called Bauhaus. Similarly, they use us in some of their Central European markets to achieve the same thing. Really, we're like Twice Commerce is a white label software. So we're the engine, we're the operating system on top of which everything runs. So you're not going to walk into a store and see, okay, Twice Commerce is here. We're the software on which everything runs to make sure that the inventories get tracked appropriately and all of that works.
That makes sense. No, cool. I think that's the right way that to basically enable companies to run these business models. And I recently read an article that after festivals, thousands of tents are basically left behind because they're just used once, and then people leave the concert or leave the festival and the tents are left behind. And there's now thinking about creating, exactly as you said, these rental models. You just rent it for one festival, and then afterwards you can return it instead of just leaving it behind and making it waste in that context. So I think that's a really important and impactful way to both create an economic incentive, both for businesses and users, but also then create this sustainable impact from an environmental and societal point of view. So I think it's a real enabler here.
For sure. And the tent example is particularly shocking when you look at the images. I mean, the fundamental problem, as you said, is incentives, right? So it's just too cheap to buy a new tent.
Yes.
But thankfully, I think the trends around what consumers are looking for and making more sustainable choices, people are willing to pay the same amount for a weekend rental than they are of actually purchasing the tent. So the consumer demand is pulling companies towards circular, and then also regulation, right? So especially at the EU level, we have a lot of regulation coming in that's hopefully going to push that trend and accelerate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, I mean, if I look at myself, I'm sometimes a do-it-yourself person. And then if I need to buy a large piece of equipment, in the back of my mind, I'm like, so where am I going to store it? Where am I going to put it? What am I going to do with it after I'm done using it? And I might use it again in 5 years. So by taking it back, by having the possibility to bring it back from where I got it, you're actually solving a problem for me, because I don't need to store it. I don't need to maintain it. I don't need to basically take care of it in that context. So it's actually an added value in that context.
For sure. And if you start thinking through your daily life, there's actually a lot of things like that you don't necessarily need to own. Like I have small children, and you know how fast they go through clothes or equipment. So definitely, I wish. I mean, we buy a lot of stuff secondhand, but I wish I could even just take it, pay for it for the duration of the use, and then just give it back.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny that you mentioned that. Here in Finland, we have in winter, every winter, the kids go out skiing and go out ice skating in school. And it's every year it's the same thing. It's like you get the message from the teacher and they say, oh, we're going ice skating next week. And you're like, oh, okay, the old ice skates are too small. So let's sell them off secondhand and buy a new pair secondhand so that they can basically use them twice or three times in school. So it's an actual turnover in that context. So I fully agree. I think kids are the prime example of where rental makes sense and secondhand. Now, data is one of the big topics in e-commerce overall, but it also plays a special role, a crucial role in driving the circular economy in order, as you said, to bring together supply and demand, balance it, level it out, and basically manage along the extended circular value chain. Can you share how Twice Commerce leverages data analytics to basically optimize like the different models, the rental model, the second-hand model, the usage of resources, and then also the reduction of waste for businesses that are on your platform?
For sure. Well, maybe if I start with sort of, again, the twice market. So, I mean, the way we look at it is that, okay, like the US is, let's say, a 40 billion market when it comes to resales. Big companies doing re-commerce is really small, like the companies that talk about it, Patagonia and whatnot, combined make maybe a couple of billion. And the rest is really peer-to-peer commerce. And actually about 50 billion of that is actually offline. So the first thing we want to do in terms of data is, I'm going to use a startup-y word here, but it's sort of like tokenize or index all of the items in the world. So what that just means basically is that all the stuff that's out there, with AI, we can just, with a click, make it digital. So now it's something that exists out there in the world in digital form. And now things can happen with it. Someone can buy it. If there are 100 similar items, then someone can buy 100 of them if they're a brand that wants to resell it, and so on and so forth. So the first step of data when it comes to sort of the resales and e-commerce market is kind of actually just building the data, right? Then on the Twice commerce side, so sort of our business product, there the first and the initial step is really the tracking. So we're able to track items on a unique level. This mountain bike has this particular wear and tear. Because once you have that in place, then you can start optimizing for maintenance. So, okay, this one has been used for 5 times. Now I need to maintain it, whereas this one only 3 times, and so on. And then you get a lot of complicated math because you're like, okay, I have 5 bikes with different wear and tear. The customer ordered one of them. Which one of the 5 does my software actually give the customer? Is it the one with the most wear and tear? Is it the one that has been just maintained? Is it the one with which is latest in the lifecycle? And that kind of optimization problem is then something we use a lot of data for.
Interesting. Yeah, I think specifically in that area, it's a lot of optimization. It's a lot of understanding exactly, as you said, what is the product, what's the usage, how do I maintain it? Because it's naturally not only about rental as a process, but it's really about also extending the lifetime of a product throughout the rental process. Because naturally, all of a sudden, the company has a whole different question. It's not just selling it off, and then it's the customer's problem, how long it lives, how it's maintained, but it's actually the company that needs to look into all of these and most likely needs to create completely new processes, approaches in that context where they very seldom have capabilities because they've never done it before.
Absolutely. And everything you just said it's funny because that is actually sort of a frightening thing to say to a CEO, is like, I have to rethink my operations. I have to rethink my entire business model. It sounds like a big, 1-year consulting project that costs $1 million. And sort of me, and again, sorry for being sort of startup minded here, but I tend to say to people like, okay, just try it out. We'll do a small pilot. Keep it very simple. So like, okay, you're doing 0 circular things today. How do we go from 0 to 1? What could we do? Could we take this one location? Could we have a small selection of products that are then, resold or rented out? Or even better, if you're thinking like, okay, re-commerce seems quite complicated. Okay, forget re-commerce for a second. Where can a customer repair their products? If they have a backpack that they bought from you, or if they have skis that they bought from you, is there a repair network? Where can they repair it? And if there isn't, maybe we just set that up first. So I think baby steps quickly are better than sort of very complicated projects that take years to implement.
And no, absolutely. And I guess that is where the platformization, if that is a proper word, comes in, that you can actually provide these capabilities without the company needing to go through the process of building these capabilities themselves. But they can basically very quickly experiment and start using the capabilities on a small scale without needing to do a lot of the front up investments that you need to do normally to build up a platform, build up the capabilities in that context, which makes it easier to start experimenting.
Absolutely, there's that for sure. There's the benefits of starting quickly by using a platform like such as Twice, but there are platforms out there in the world other than ours. But then also, everyone is at the beginning of their circular journeys, really. Some are further ahead than others, but everyone is at the beginning. So, you don't really know. Like, you don't know what is exactly the commerce infrastructure that you'll need in 5 years. You don't know what the adoption is going to be like. You don't know who your logistics partners are going to be. You don't know what kind of operation you're going to have for maintenance. So, it usually, when there's a lot of uncertainty, it usually isn't a good idea to do $1 million investment into a complicated software stack. You'd much rather start with a platform, see how it goes, and then learn exactly what it is you need and what your customers want.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Now, related to that, how do you actually measure the impact in your own operations, in the Twice markets, as well as in the Twice commerce place? Like, how do you measure that? And are there any specific metrics or key performance indicators that you're using to actually showcase how much impact you've been delivering using the Twice platform?
Sure. So the way we look at it is we sort of look at our handprint as a company. So we look at, okay, obviously we have like a carbon footprint because, we sometimes we travel by plane and, office has heating and people commute, right? But we're a software company, so it's quite minuscule. And then we have our handprint. So what is the circular transition that we're sort of enabling? And the way we look at that is, not to get into too much nitty-gritty, but of every order that happens on the Twice platform, there's a certain share of those orders that would not have happened otherwise, that are sort of like replacing a linear purchase transaction. So instead of buying a tent, they're renting a tent. And that share we then attribute to our handprint. And right now, I think our handprint is tens of times higher than our small footprint. So yeah, that's how we look at it. And the good thing, and sort of coming back to maybe my story from before, like what I was hoping to do in my career next was have like a net positive effect, but then also apply my toolkit and work on growth and strategy and this kind of stuff. And this is really the perfect combination, because the more we grow this platform, which we believe in strongly, the higher our net impact as a company actually is. So all the incentives are aligned for me personally as well quite nicely.
Perfect. Now it's interesting that you mentioned that. A couple of episodes ago, we had a guest who has, from a research point of view, been working around the handprint. And one thing he said was that, you can optimize your footprint as much as you want. There's a limit to that. If you're at zero, you're at zero. But if you want to optimize your handprint, there's actually no limit to that. And that's exactly what you're alluding to. The better you do, the more successful you are in developing the platform, in extending the platform, in exactly as you said, growing and scaling, the bigger the handprint is. And there's no limitation to that. So actually great to hear that you have this focus not only on your own operations, but on the good you can do for the companies and for the individuals that are using the platform.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of sort of the core tenets of the company, I'd say.
Cool. Now, the coffee is empty, and it's unfortunately time to wrap up the episode. But before I let you go, let's maybe briefly look ahead. How do you see the principles of circular economy actually shaping the future of e-commerce? And what do you envision the role of Twice to be in that future?
Yeah, great question. So I think, like I said, in the short term, circular economy when it comes to commerce is going to be mostly about resales and secondhand sales, let's say. And then eventually we're going to go up the adoption curve and we're going to have these more complicated business models become more mainstream, like rentals and subscriptions. But right now it's going to be re-commerce. And then when you come to re-commerce, there's a lot of platforms out there that do various types of marketplaces, some national, some more local. And there's a lot of classified platforms as well where people just post ads of stuff they want to sell. So what Twice is doing is we're really working on that bottom of the pyramid, that hyperlocal part of the re-commerce market, which is now not happening. So the stuff just remains in people's houses or storage units, or then is happening very locally through yard sales or things like that, or it's happening hyperlocally within the city. And that's what we want to really accelerate. So city by city, launching and scaling this platform so that eventually all of the secondhand intent of the world gets listed and it becomes sort of normal behavior for people to, okay, I'm done with this thing, I'm going to Twice it, and it's going to be out in the world. So that's one. And as that happens, if that is sort of then the supply side again, then on the demand side, what I suspect will happen is in e-commerce, more and more in shopping journeys, if you go to whatever e-commerce site you use to shop, you're going to have an option either natively with the platform that you use or through plugins, etc. You're going to have the option to find that same product secondhand that you're currently, you're one click away from purchasing that item in virgin materials, but now you're going to have a secondhand item proposed to you, and a lot of people are going to, or an increasing amount of people are going to opt in for that secondhand option when it becomes available to them. But, we build the supply, so then we can facilitate the demand.
Interesting. And I think specifically what's interesting is that you're working on this intersection between a hyper-local consumer market and then with big companies who are traditionally thinking global, large scale, global supply chains, and basically bringing that demand and supply together will be an interesting space to be in. Thanks a lot, Henry, for joining me today. Really interesting topic. And I guess we could have talked for another half hour on the topic, as there's so many different facets and perspectives there. Thanks, Henry.
Thanks so much for having me.
For all of you listening out there, as always, we hope today's episode brought some new interesting insights and inspiration to basically become circular, drive your business into the circular direction. If you like the podcast, you can help us grow the circular coffee break community by giving us a 5-star rating and a positive review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever other podcast platforms you're using. Also, please remember to subscribe to stay in the loop on episodes that drop every 2 weeks. The only thing left for me now is to thank you for listening today and for tuning in, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all here at the Circular Coffee Break Podcast.